Well, I do believe you make your own luck. You know, you have to try doing something 10 ways for it to work once. You have to create 10 concepts to find the one thing that might be good or useful. So I think if you're willing to put in the sheer work, that is how you in part mitigate the pure luck of it. You increase your chances of something working.
Welcome to Things I've Learned, the podcast in which we explore how the inner worlds of designers, architects, and creatives shape the world around us, by asking them to reflect on success, failure, and of course, design itself. I'm McKinley. What is the purpose of design? Is it simply to solve problems, to make our spaces more efficient, our buildings more functional, our products easier to use? Or has design, in chasing solutions, sometimes overlooked its ability to make life more joyful, to facilitate richer and more meaningful experiences? Design doesn't just dictate how things work, of course. It shapes how we feel. I sometimes wonder if we value that enough. Can a building, a space, or even a chair do more than meet a practical need? Can it lift us, calm us, spark creativity, or make us hopeful? And if design can bring joy, might that be more than just a pleasant side effect? Could joy itself be a purpose? And what might it mean if we saw delight not as decoration, but as an essential outcome of design? How design balances utility with a grander sense of purpose and emotion is something we'll explore more this episode, as I'm joined by Benjamin Hubert, the renowned industrial designer and founder of London-based design studio Layer. Benjamin has collaborated with some of the biggest brands around, from Vitra to Braun, on products and tech, physical and digital experiences, strategy and branding. And underpinning it all is a simple sounding but big idea that together we can change the world through design. Benjamin, welcome to Things I've Learned. So tell me, what brings you joy?
I think when I'm happiest, when I feel joy the most, it's when I feel things are in balance, or have a sense of harmony, where your work-life balance feels measured, where things work well in your home and family as well as in your workplace. When, you know, my partner Mandy is happy and my team is happy at Layer, it's a sense of equilibrium. I also see it in the team at Layer. When more facets of their life feel well looked after, they're happier as a designer, and a happy designer is a good designer.
Does design facilitate that in any way? Because the things that you talk about there, happiness, balance, we sometimes don't associate those with the environments we're in, the products we use, the spaces that we occupy. Does design play a role in those things?
I mean, the world is certainly out of balance at the moment, isn't it? In so many senses of the word. Design has to play a contributing role to that sentiment. Everything around us is designed. Every aspect of our life is designed, whether it's incidental or planned. So I think fundamentally designers or creatives have a responsibility to input on that equilibrium and be part of that balance. And, you know, if we think about the environments we occupy, whether it's our home, whether it's the public realm, whether it's our workplace, not everything is perfect. Everything can always be improved. And I think it's actually, when we're talking about design, our role to analyze how we can find areas to improve and impact upon, and even if extremely incrementally, make a difference. And I mean, ultimately, your intro was really interesting. It all boils down to experience. How do we feel about that experience? What experience have we had? What experience do we remember? Who do we tell about it? Why do we always remember the bad experiences over the good experiences? You know, it's human nature to a certain extent, but I think any designer would start with that sentiment. Let's create a better experience.
Well, hopefully we'll focus on those good experiences in our first chapter on success. But before that, a quick message. Finding a quiet place at work for a private meeting or deep focused work shouldn't feel like navigating Piccadilly Circus. Bureau builds modular booths that aren't just privacy pods. They're flexible, high-performing environments designed for deep focus, quick calls, or team huddles. Built from sustainable materials, flat-packed for low-impact shipping, and crafted to last. From co-working floors to corporate offices and beyond, Bureau creates workspaces that, well, work. And with a human team guiding you from first quote to final install, change is refreshingly straightforward. See what's possible at withbureau.com. So, Benjamin, success. You've worked on over 150 collaborations. That's probably grown since I even found that figure, and garnered more than 200 awards. That's pretty impressive. Do you consider yourself successful?
Wow, it's a very loaded question. The design industry, any creative industry, is measured. We are interested in measurements. I think design, for it to have value, has to have impact, has to have a return on investment, has to have numbers put against often the subjective, fluffy, squidgy bit that you can't really define. So we're quite interested in that as a studio, which is why you're recalling certain numbers that are on our website. And that is a measure of success of work, but it's not complete. It's not holistic. It's not the full story.
So how do you define success then? If you can't put a number on it, what is your personal definition of what success looks like?
A lot of it is about satisfaction. So how satisfied are all the different stakeholders, bit of a corporate turn of phrase, but all the different people involved in a process. So the partner you're working with and designers that are thinking, implementing, executing, the people that it's impacting upon that use the space product experience. All of those things have to sort of have a tick box against them to say, oh, okay, it achieved improvement. And if all of those people in that setup say, yeah, I feel like it did, and I'm satisfied that it's moved things along. Is it perfect? Is it ever perfect? No, I think you have to come to terms with that reluctantly. Designers are perfectionists, and sometimes you feel like the measure of success is absolute perfection, but that's a red herring. It doesn't exist because the game is shifting, the world is changing. So the qualification of what success is always moving. So for me, it's just about everyone part of that process, including myself, feeling like each of those facets has a sense of achievement and satisfaction. I mean, I've been doing this a little while. I've been a designer for nearly 20 years. Leia is 10 years old this year. And the longer I do this for, the more I'm interested in the softer side of success. So the happiness factor, how rewarded do people feel when they're part of that process.
Can you remember the first time that you tasted success? And did you learn anything from that?
From an early age, I was always very excited and interested in art. I loved sculpture, painting, oils, watercolor. I think the first moment I must have been 6 or 7, and I remember a teacher just saying, it was a tree I painted, and it was just a compliment. And it was the first time I think I realized I might be okay at this. And then, whenever anyone that knows me, whenever I do something, I fully go in on it, like all consuming, and I really focus on it. And I think it was that kernel that started that really focused journey on art, which then manifested itself later in design.
How has your success been shaped now by some of those pivotal projects that you have worked on? Are there other examples then, other kind of tentpole moments on that journey that have also felt like success, whether it's outside validation, someone saying that was fantastic, or something that you've personally felt went really well? What are some of those other pivotal successes, and what did you learn from those?
I studied at Loughborough University in the middle of the UK and in industrial design and technology, and great course, but it taught me to be a designer working within a team. And I was really dead set on working my way through up to be a directorial level in an existing business. I didn't really have an entrepreneurial streak, but I did that. I started at some great design consultancies, but there was a couple of moments in the beginning of that chapter where I exhibited at New Designers and was very, very fortunate to receive an award for a slightly strange glass lamp that you would blow out and clap on at the time. And then started experimenting with things in my basement, making prototypes whilst having my day job. And then also, got a little press coverage or a few awards and things like that. And suddenly it's like something was ignited in me. It demonstrated that there was a path or a track that I could follow outside of conventional structures. It showed me that there was an audience for that. And it really just set me off on a very, very hungry mission to succeed in it. It's those first moments of exhibiting in London when I was studying in the middle of the UK and working in the middle of the UK that was like, wow, there's an industry here and I'd like to be part of it.
What does that unconventional structure look like? And how are you able to shape success, I suppose, in a way that is, in and of itself, unconventional?
So I think the convention I'm talking about is not a negative. It's actually incredibly positive. And for 5 or 6 years, I worked in design studios, learning my early parts of my craft, and it taught me a lot. And I would call that a more traditional structure of going into those pre-existing setups where the boundaries are set, the risk is zero because you're working within another business, more or less. But to bulk that, I was investing all of my money for my day job, all of my time, sacrificing social time to build little prototypes of bits of furniture, lighting, accessories, pay for exhibitions, working late into the evening. And that investment perhaps is the slightly unconventional thing. I'm not sure I'd recommend it. I was 20-something, and I'm not sure it's the most healthy use of time, energy, or youth for the record. But, I'm a great believer of what you put in, you get back. And to break those conventions, I think you need to break the mold somehow. And in doing so, you stretch and push yourself, hopefully not to breaking point. But I would never have been able to, I had a studio under my name 5 years before Leia. I wouldn't have been able to take that jump without a high level of trade-off in perhaps my personal life even, and invest in my sort of dreams in design, as cliched as that.
Was it worth it?
Sounds. Well, time will tell. Harry, as much as I do in anything creative, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Although you feel like you're sprinting a lot throughout that journey. I've been fortunate. I've worked hard, but I've been really fortunate. You need both to go far in anything. Yeah, I feel very lucky that I have a team that believes in me and what we do in the studio, and partners that reflect the same. And that, I think, is a great sense of measurement of success for me at the moment.
It's so interesting that you say that for you it was all consuming, that you had to make certain sacrifices. Earlier this season, I spoke to Sandrine Zhang-Theron, who's the CEO of Interior. And she made the point that we often frame success as being the result of hard work. And that actually she slightly disagrees with that for her, there's just as much luck involved. What do you make of that?
Well, I do believe you make your own luck. You have to try doing something 10 ways for it to work once. You have to create 10 concepts to find the one thing that might be good or useful. So I think if you're willing to put in the sheer work to reduce the risk of something not being successful, but be okay with the fact that lots of those things will fail, that is how you in part mitigate the pure luck of it. It's not to say there's not circumstance. Circumstance is really important. Happenstance, circumstance where you might meet somebody and that kind of thing. It plays a role in this. But if you push yourself, put yourself out there, explore lots of different avenues of, for example, in my case, it was ideas, it was projects, it was competitions, it was all of these things. You increase your chances of something working. I think the talent part of it is the contentious part. So skills are learned over time. Sensibility is shaped with experience. I think attitude, openness, a welcomingness to chaos and change and being able to embrace that and channel it is really important. So point of view, I think, is a great sort of supplement or partner to hard work. And then I think the luck thing is sort of, however you frame it, and ability is wrapped up in all of those things.
Well, that idea of learning how to mitigate failure, how to learn from failure, is a beautiful seg into our next chapter, because we've covered all of the The chummy stuff, success, and now we'll talk about failure. But first, a message. Mix Interiors is the leading platform for commercial interior design and architecture, in print and online. We feature the people shaping and reshaping the world around us. Explore the latest projects setting the bar for exceptional design and showcase the products at the very forefront of innovation and creativity. For more information on how to subscribe in print or to view the latest digital content, head to mixinteriors.com. So can you think of a time when you tasted failure in work or life? And what did that teach you?
How long have you got? I wish I was joking. I think in anything like, what I take on, you experience a lot of things that don't go as planned. Perhaps that's how I would frame failure. Failure sounds like it's super negative and you don't do anything after failing. Failing is it, it's the end point. But what I think it is you have a plan, maybe it doesn't go quite as you planned, and then you navigate a new path from that. There's been a lot of instances where that path has changed. When I set my studio up under my name, it was good. We were a very, very small studio, a couple of people, and were working on some nice furniture projects for some infamous brands, making a little bit of a return, but nowhere near what I thought was a reasonable business model. And so needed to pivot. I have a lot of respect for people that, run namesake design studios and have that signature style, which, you see at, Milan Design Week and things like that. But it's a really hard game. And it's a game that's been built from, in the mid-century onwards, the royalty game, the celebrity designer mode. And I don't know if it's as successfully built for today's world. And I recognize that a little bit. Back in 2015, realized things had to change, made the very difficult decision of taking my name off of the studio, pivoting the business to Layer, creating a setup that combined some of my agency background, so strategy, consulting and things like that, with the softer side of design and, new heirlooms and pieces that you keep for a longer amount of time, and, maybe that furniture and accessories signature space. And it allowed a team to be formed under something that was bigger than myself, bigger than my point of view. They could rally behind. We could shape something where people would come to us with a wider breadth of work. But at the time, it felt like turning a light off and then seeing what was next. A really big change. It's worked really hard to get to that point.
That doesn't sound necessarily to me like a failure. It almost sounds like being nudged in a different direction. Are there any specific failures that you would look back at now then that you wouldn't undo, even if you could, because actually it led to future success or it pushed you in that different direction, which actually has potentially paid off even more?
Running a design studio in London has its challenges, has its opportunities, right? You're surrounded by great things, inspiration, great people, but it's quite a transient city, and design is quite transient. And running a design agency, you're at the pointy end of that. Over the years, sometimes some members of the team who were great, that we loved, did really good work, decided to move on. And every time, that happens, you have to embrace that as any business owner, and particularly in the creative field. And sometimes it can feel like failure. Sometimes it can feel like you've let them down or it hasn't worked. And, I'm a single founder. I'm the only founder of the business. I don't have a business partner. And so it can feel sometimes a little lonely in those moments when you go through that. But, a few weeks later, a few months later, when a different team member has stepped forward or someone else has joined the studio, it brings that new energy, and it's really cyclical. It's this cycle which never stops. So it's this, when you said, have you ever experienced failure? I think you roll from things not quite working to things being very successful. And there's sort of a net increase or net improvement, but it never goes away. And you have to have the capacity, the thick skinness of it to be able to cope with that, I think.
What have you learnt then about rolling with the punches? So something feels like failure in the moment. What have you learnt about picking yourself back up again and moving forward?
We worked on it's a published project, and it's a 3D printed wheelchair about 10 years ago, actually. And we used it as a catalyst for layer starting. That project, Nike came to us, and they came to a number of designers to put on a showcase in Milan. And it was about motion and movement, and everybody's an athlete, incredible sentiments. And when they briefed us, we took it very seriously. We were very sort of studious in our response to this, and thought about mobility in the sense of body movement. And this is why we put together this proposal for a made-to-measure, fit for everybody, extension of the body wheelchair. And they liked it and they're interested in it. But I got a call. It was really brutal. I got a call from the curator at the time, and he was like, sorry, but they're not going to do it. We've been working on this for about 6 months. And they're like, no, they really love your idea, but they're not prepared to put a concept wheelchair in the exhibition that speaks to something that they maybe aren't doing. And it was really, really hard because the project was cancelled. So after a couple of days, we decided to continue the project under our own steam, under our own budget. We made mock-ups and prototypes, and we launched it at Clark & Moore Design Week. We entered it into awards. We spoke to the message around it, and it got a huge amount of traction. It won a really big award, and suddenly everyone was calling us. And then later we talked about the story with Nike to give it some context. And it was like a superstar at the time for us. Everyone referenced it. They wanted the version of it. We licensed the IP of it. We worked on other mobility products from, adjustable hospital beds to wheelchairs to mobility aids. And I think the moral of the story for us was just, it was a really big blow in the middle of the project. But there's always a path forward if you're tenacious and willing to let it not stop you.
So it started out as something that felt like failure, but did that lead you to perhaps trust your gut a little bit more, to have confidence in your projects?
If you have a strong story, a strong concept, a strong idea, then people are interested in it. And it's not necessarily tied to brand association. Brand association makes the world go round. We're not naive to that. And I think this was the thing that felt like such a setback. But it was a high concept, interesting answer to an interesting question. And that has been something we've tried to maintain in our work in smaller and bigger ways. And I think that's been the lesson. Maintain a really strong story, because that in the end is what will cut through.
And because you do often tread new ground, I'm wondering what's more frustrating for you: a good idea poorly executed, or a well-executed idea that just doesn't land with consumers or with the client?
I think they both are pretty challenging and both rewarding. Context is everything. A great idea isn't a great idea in a vacuum. A great idea is something where it gets traction and lots of people use it. It's beneficial for the planet and it drives revenue, and the financial model of it works. So a great idea in isolation is a great thought piece, but not necessarily great design, because design is about impact. Great design should be for the many. So seeing people feeling happier, healthier, the smile on their face, the joy, you talked about joy before, so the joy that they feel. Unless you have that component to a project, then it's just another idea. And ideas come and go.
And yet you are full of what I consider to be quite bold ideas. That failure, that feeling of rejection from Nike could have been the end of that project, but it wasn't. So how do you know when to abandon a failing idea and when to fight for it?
It's really important to listen to people. So lots of people along that journey were saying how excited they were. We were talking to medical professionals, we were talking to potential users, and we were getting a huge amount of excitement. It was just Nike, legal comms team that said no. And I got why. It wasn't that we don't believe in the idea. It was like, we can't put our logo on this because of the political challenges it might create. The team is really important. We listen to everybody in the team. We listen to the partners we work with. We do consumer groups. You've got to get a critical mass of feedback. And then you can go, okay, well, that feels good. Or maybe some of the sentiments which are less positive, we need to act upon, and they're actually a priority. And a situational no doesn't mean it's a bad idea. But perhaps if you did a user group and a whole bunch of people were concerned about it, then you shouldn't just plow on regardless.
Do you think the design world creates enough space for honest conversations around failure? Or do you think we're often too focused on the success stories?
I think the design world is incredibly closed, incredibly competitive. And, you get why, particularly in today's financial climate. Everyone is fighting, trying to win the projects, all of the things, right? So the openness to sharing how something has worked, why it didn't work. A, there's not many forums for it. And then B, I just think people aren't necessarily in it for the community they're in it for their business. Everyone is so busy promoting that where is the place to have the honest discussion and why are we having it? What are we going to create from that? Are we going to regulate the industry? Are we going to improve standards? Are we going to stop underbidding? Are we going to stop free pitching? What's the purpose of this dialogue? All of these things are positives, but it takes a lot of people to embrace that for those things to work.
Well, that we're going to talk about a little bit more in our next chapter on design. But first, a brief message. Powered by Mix Interiors, Mix Awards is the most important awards program for commercial interior design and architecture, celebrating the most groundbreaking projects, the most inventive products, and the people behind them. For more information on Mix Awards and Mix Awards North, the biggest nights in the design calendar, visit mixinteriors.com. You mentioned purpose. So for you, Benjamin, what is design for? Is it to solve, to sell, to comfort, to disrupt, or even maybe to bring us joy?
All of the above. Ultimately, we go back to experience. We want to create great experiences for people, but not to the detriment of the world around us. Not stuff for stuff's sake because it makes people happier, it makes their life easier. It has to be holistically measured in the world we live. Otherwise, you sacrifice one thing to win another. But that can't not be in tune with, the design is not in a vacuum, mostly in terms of there is a brand or a partner you work with or a client. And so you need success for them. So that's generally a financial measure. So you need that too. I'm a big believer in form follows function, function and performance driving the agenda and form being the wrapper around that. So it has to work really well. It has to be smart, it has to be better than in terms of performance, but not to the detriment of being beautiful, evocative, engaging, emotionally relevant and resonant.
But can something just be beautiful? Is that a purpose in design in and of itself? I know that design isn't necessarily art, but one could argue that a painting, for example, that tree doesn't necessarily fulfill any functional purpose. And yet it also serves a role in culture, in society. It is evocative. It makes us feel something.
So you are talking about the difference between design and art, effectively. Can anything be emotional, beautiful, memorable, in a slightly more one-dimensional facet? Can you talk about function as in improving mindset and improving psychology and improving happiness like that? You could. But this is still art, in my opinion, whether it is sculpture, whether it is art masquerading as a chair. It feels funny to be binary about this and black and white about it. It's okay for an art piece to also be a chair. I don't believe a great design chair is just an art piece. That perhaps is the difference here. I think a great design chair has to have its core functionality, comfort, dematerialization, work in a large setting, small setting, domestic, residential, all of these types of situation working. If it doesn't have those things, then it is an art piece. So cross-pollination of these things, which breeds interesting inspiration and dialogue and tension and new expressions, which is the positive, but perhaps it also erodes what design should be, where design should be about improving things, making things better, than being of great performance. That is what that maybe is sacrificed in that dialogue.
So what are the design values then that you find yourself applying or defending?
Great question. I believe that design should be useful. It should make an environment, a space, a place, an interaction better. It should be mindful. So mindful of planet and person and how to strike a balance and harmony between those things. I believe it should be expressive, but not to the detriment of the two former aspects. I think restraint is quite a big component of this. It shouldn't be austere. It shouldn't be devoid of character and equality, but it should perhaps just, enough design to work and be beautiful and engage, but not so much design that it overrides and isn't timeless. I'm a big believer in timelessness. So things should last. They should outlast trends and the zeitgeist and be passed down through generations, and it's accessible. Great design should be for as many people as possible. And these are foundations and metrics that have been around for a while. We subscribe to them.
Well, I feel like that collective sensibility plays into the mantra that you have as a studio, which is that together we can change the world through design. What do you mean by that? What is the change that design should facilitate?
Well, firstly, the togetherness is perhaps the starting point of that. So nothing happens in isolation. So the togetherness is, we can be a component of that. A brand or a client can be a component of that. The world around us, the user can be a component of that. There is a sort of community aspect to achieving success, and to achieve success, I believe things have to move on. Things have to improve. Things have to get better. And so that's the change part of it. We constantly need to be looking forward, and we need to be thinking about how to make things better. We do not live in a perfect world. In fact, you could argue we're living in a more imperfect world day by day. So, this is what designs can be. They can be change makers. We have the responsibility to do that. It doesn't mean that things have to be radical all the time, because the world doesn't operate like that. People don't consume radical change easily. Things should be measured, and you take people with you, and you offer incremental difference so that more people buy into it. And then you take another step together, and you take people with you on that journey. And all of those sentiments are wrapped up in, together we can change the world together.
Are there any particular changes that you would like to see in the world that potentially design has some role in creating?
I think there are many challenges where design could be at the table to contribute to and be part of the discussion, and often isn't. How do you bring design to the conversation from a governmental, political, socioeconomic point of view? It often feels executional and something which comes much later to the discussion. Designers are guilty, really guilty of contributing to the challenges we face from a sustainability point of view. And we are in the business of creating more things. And so, we are responsible to be mindful around what we say yes to, how we configure that, what we drive in terms of a agenda, particularly with the partners that come to us. So it's a broad-ranging answer to your question, but design is a major factor to the world around us.
But maybe a lot of people don't understand that. When you said that, design should have a seat at the table in some of these conversations, I think there are a lot of people who won't even understand why. So what is it about the design world? What part of the design process do you wish that people understood better?
As I said before, everything is designed. It has been crafted and created and therefore is designed. And that's not front of mind. Maybe it shouldn't be. Things should be, disappear and integrate. But, when you talk about design, often it's something that's a bit hyperbolic. It's something that's extreme. It's extraordinary. It's very expressive. It's the headline. It's the capital D of design. And that is what people consider design. They don't consider the humble object which just blends in, which just makes that microsecond a little bit better. And that's perhaps what's not communicated, that it's those very small moments and the build-up of all those moments which make things better. I think to understand that, this is an education piece. This is about sharing the process, around talking about how the mundane can become memorable. And I think that's the role of somebody like yourself, Harry. People that communicate, talk about, curate, design. And it's the role of the design community, but it goes much broader than that.
What question about design are you still trying to answer?
I'd like to figure out how we can impact in areas and communities and parts of the world that maybe need design as something to make things work, really work. Not just a nice to have, whether it's a charity-based organization, an NGO, a community-based project, something that goes through a government. We have an amazing skill set in the studio and we're utilized for some great projects. But so rarely are we asked to do something in these types of contexts. We would do it completely pro bono. We would dedicate huge amounts of our time to achieve it. And I often say this, but it's not as simple as that. Getting things implemented on the ground in environments that are really challenging, I think is a big part of this. But it's the question I'm still trying to answer is how do we get our skill set to impact in parts of the world and in contexts which really need it?
Do you think we'll ever be able to answer that question?
Well, I hope so. Otherwise, you know what? You talked about failure. I think I would consider what we do in some respects to have failed if we can't find those opportunities to make a difference when a difference is really needed.
Well, Benjamin, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've absolutely loved talking to you. I love this idea that perhaps it takes 10 failures to create one success, but if each of those failures has nudged us in a better direction, then they're a really vital part of the process. I think that's a wonderful lesson, maybe not just for the creative industries, but for life as a whole. I also appreciate that you recognize that hard work and luck go hand in hand, but perhaps we create our own luck. And I like that how we grapple with the questions of design is arguably as important as the answers. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Harry. It's been great.
So thank you for joining us, and thank you for listening to Things I've Learned. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you like and subscribe, and of course, tell your friends about it. If you missed any episodes from season 1, where I was speaking to the likes of Patrick Schumacher from Zaha Hadid, designer of the moment, Beata Heyman, restaurant designer Aphrodite Krasa, you can catch up wherever you're listening to this. We also film these conversations, so if you want to see us as well as hear us, head over to our website, mixinteriors.com, or find us on YouTube. We're taking a mid-season break now for the festive period, but join me in January when I'll be back with another batch of conversations, kicking off with designer Linda Baronke. Things I've Learned is hosted by me, Harry McKinley. The episode was produced by Nada Smiljanic, and the executive producer was Dan Jackson, with original music by Memo Tone. Things I've Learned is a co-production by We're Just Listening and Mix Interiors.